What is up, guys? Chef Shaun O'Neale here, winner of MasterChef Season 7 and author of the cookbook, My Modern American Table. I am so excited to have teamed up with CookCraft to tell you about my personal favorite cookware and show you some incredible recipes that you can make at home. Now, these recipes are going to be ambitious, but with a little bit of attention to detail and the right cookware, you'll be mastering these in no time. So, today we are going to kick off with one of my signature pastas. It's a pretty classic flavor combination. So we're doing a spinach and artichoke cappelletti. We'll talk a little bit more about what a cappelletti is here in a little bit. But first thing we gotta do to make a pasta dish is make some pasta. So let's get going. Okay, so we're gonna be using 3 different pieces from CookCraft today. We're gonna be using the 3-quart saucepan, the 8-quart stock pot, and then the 10-inch skillet. These are all the signature Tri-Ply Stainless steel construction, which really makes them excellent at retaining heat. So, let's make our pasta. And it's a pretty simple pasta dish. I'm using a food processor today because we're gonna make a spinach flavored and colored pasta. So I've already made the spinach puree. All I did was take 1 bunch of spinach. Yes, that is 1 bunch of spinach. We blanched it. Then I transferred it to an ice bath to cool it down, really help it retain its color. Blended it with about a half a cup of water. And then we got a nice, beautiful puree that is going to not only fragrance our pasta, give it a little bit of flavor, but give it a beautiful green color. So let's get started with our pasta dough. So the first thing we're doing, we're just using regular all-purpose flour. You could use 00 flour, which is traditional for pasta doughs, but I mean, all-purpose flour is easy to find, it's accessible, but 00 flour is available on Amazon. So we're gonna use 2 cups. 2 cups of all-purpose flour going into our food processor. So I've made pasta every single way you can imagine. I find that making pasta that's colored or flavored with something like a spinach puree or beets or squid ink, those are my 3 personal favorite colored pastas. It's easier to do it in a food processor. It just kind of incorporates that color a lot better. I mean, you can do it by hand making a well, but you're gonna be standing there really mixing and kneading for a good 20-30 minutes. So, food processor eliminates that, really makes it a little bit easier to get everything going. So we've got our 2 cups of flour in. Now we're gonna add our spinach puree that we already talked about. Okay, so we've got our spinach puree in there, and that was about a half a cup. That whole bunch, I used 1 bunch or 1 bag. Mine came in a bunch from my grocery store. That whole bunch reduced down to about a half a cup of puree. So make sure that you use enough. Don't use a half a bag that you've got left over in the fridge. Make sure you get a fresh batch for this. And the fresher the better, because that's gonna give you a more vibrant color. Now we're gonna add 5 egg yolks. Kind of spread those around if you can. And then a little bit of salt. So we're not gonna salt this too heavily because we're gonna cook this in salted water, right? Because that's how you cook pasta. You salt the water like the sea. So we're not gonna add a lot of salt in here because it will be cooked in that salted water. Now we're gonna put this on high and we're gonna let the food processor really do the magic and the hard work for us. Okay, so what we're looking for is something similar, reminiscent of wet sand. And then we want it to start clumping just a tad bit. So that's still a little bit on the dry side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take off the lid here and I'm gonna put a little bit of water in my, my container that I had the spinach puree in, just to help it along just a little bit more. Okay, so this will also really help you set that color in. So I'm gonna turn it back on high and we're just gonna drip this in ever so carefully. All right, so you can see it's starting to clump up just a tad. That's exactly what I want to see right there. All right, so that looks pretty good. Let's transfer this out. It's a little bit on the wet side, but I love the color. The color is very vibrant. But we're gonna be kneading this for a couple minutes, so if it's a little bit wet, that's okay. If it's really soaking wet, then you might wanna add a little bit more flour in there. But let's grab out what we can get here. All right, get all these scraps down here on the bottom, and then we're gonna knead this together. And I know it looks kind of sloppy, right? It looks like it's all over the place. But once we start squeezing on this a little bit, all that dough is gonna start coming together and start forming a nice cohesive dough ball. Just keep pressing it together. All right, and now we're just gonna start kneading this. You know, you might have some leftover flaking and that's okay. All right guys, so we've been kneading this for about 5 minutes and I'm already working up a sweat, so thank goodness we did this in the food processor. That really gets the glutens going even faster than really working it by hand. You know, that's what you're doing when you're kneading pasta, is you're getting the glutens activated and getting that elasticity and that toothsomeness. That also comes a little bit from the eggs. You know, you could have made this pasta 100% with that green spinach puree, but the eggs give it a little bit more elasticity and again that toothsomeness. So this is looking great, that bright green Play-Doh, and as you can see, it's a solid consistency. If we hadn't used the food processor, there might be little white or off-white flakes in there from the flour and the egg, but because of using the food processor, we got that beautiful consistency. So now we're just going to form it into a ball. It might have some little cracks in it as you're doing it. This doesn't have to be perfect like a pie dough, because that will kind of seal itself as it rests. So we're gonna wrap this up nice and snug, and we're gonna let this rest for 1 hour while we move on and make our filling and the other components for our dish. All right guys, so that beautiful spinach pasta dough is resting for about an hour, so now it's time to move over to the artichoke side of things. So we're playing with that classic pairing of spinach and artichoke. This filling really could not be any easier. First thing I want to do, all I did was I got some really good quality jarred artichoke hearts. Artichokes are a pain in the butt. We all know that if we've ever played with them or worked with them before. So just get some really good quality jarred artichokes. So what we want to do, I've got one of the large size jars here, and I'm going to take out all the nice little cute guys, right? The little ones. So we're going to save those for garnish. So stuff around that size, obviously we don't want to use things like that. It will take up a lot of room on the plate, and that's better for the filling, right? So we'll take out all these little guys that are going to look kind of attractive on the plate, and we will set those aside. Now that looks pretty good. I think I usually use odd numbers, so I'm going to want 5 per plate. It's me and my wife this evening, so I need 10 of those guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 2 extra for just in case artichokes, right? So in a little while we'll sear those guys off, but that will be towards the end once we've made the pasta and all that kind of good stuff. So let's get our artichokes in the food processor, and then we're also going to use a little bit more than a cup of ricotta cheese. We'll just get that right in there. And then this is lemon juice and lemon zest from one lemon. Lemon and artichoke are a match made in heaven as well, so we'll pour this right in. And then we're gonna season this with some salt, of course. Always season with salt, but again, not too heavily because we have that salted water that we're gonna cook our pasta in. And then some white pepper. The reason I'm using white pepper instead of black pepper, it's gonna be a white filling, right? I don't really want those flecks of black pepper kind of showing through. So we're gonna use white pepper throughout this recipe, also in our 3 onion soupis, which we'll be getting to in a few minutes. But let's give this guy a buzz, make sure everything's well incorporated. And you want this to be smooth, so you're gonna let it go for a couple minutes. All right, so let's check this out. That looks pretty good. Everything's kind of clear from the sides. Thickness is nice. Let's give it a little taste. I'm just gonna use my finger. Oh, that's good. The lemon shines through so good, even though we only use that little bit. A little bit more salt, and a little bit more white pepper. This is the important part about seasoning, right? Once you put it in that pasta, you can't taste it anymore until it's cooked, right? So you want to make sure that your salt level's right, your pepper level's right. That should be good. So now what we want to do is we want to take our blade out first and pound anything off. Now we're going to transfer this to a piping bag. And this really just makes it super easy to pipe out your little Capoletti fillings once you have your dough cut. So we're just going to transfer this over to a piping bag. Alright, so that's just about everything out of there. So this looks a little loose right now, but once we put it in the fridge, that that ricotta will start to set up a little bit more, and we're gonna let this sit. Obviously it's gonna sit for about an hour and a half because we've gotta let the pasta finish resting, and then we've gotta roll the pasta out, cut the pasta, and then that's when we'll start filling the pasta. So by the time you get to that, this will have kind of the density of ricotta cheese. So put this in the fridge and don't mess with it for an hour until you're ready, hour and a half until you're ready to actually start filling out your pasta. So let's move on to our onion soubise, or faux soubise if you will. It's not exactly what a technical soubise would be, making a bechamel and then adding the onions and going about it that way. We're gonna complete the process but doing a couple shortcuts. So we're gonna cook all our onions down in some butter first. We're gonna start by using some yellow onions, some leeks, and some scallions, and we're gonna cook those down in 4 tablespoons of butter. And then we're gonna add our cream and our flour and kind of make a bechamel. So we're gonna be using the CookCraft 3-quart saucepan for this. So first thing we wanna do is get our pan heated up. And we'll go ahead and add our butter. We're gonna let this cook until the foaming subsides, so about 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, so our butter is nicely melted. We can go ahead and start adding our onions. We're gonna add all these guys at the same time. We're not trying to get any caramelization on them. We're just trying to really soften them and basically melt them. So we're gonna add these all at the same time, and we're gonna cook them for about 20 minutes, stirring often. Now we'll season again with salt and a little bit of white pepper because we're going for that beautiful white puree, so we wanna use white pepper so we don't have those black pepper flakes again. All right, so these onions are nicely softened now. We're gonna add our flour. We're gonna let this cook for about 3 minutes just to toast the flour to get that raw flavor out of the flour. Then we'll add our cream and we'll let this cook for about another 20 minutes until the cream is thickened just ever so slightly over medium to medium low heat. You don't wanna scorch the cream, and you wanna stir it as often as possible. It's no secret that onions are one of the greatest smells in the culinary world, and this soubise magnifies that by 1,000. So this is pretty much done. Let's grab it. It's nice and thick. It's exactly what we're looking for. So now we're gonna transfer this to our blender. Oh yeah. That's beautiful. That is exactly what we're looking for. So you're gonna have a lot more soubise than you actually need for this. We're just gonna dot it around the plate. You could use this for a multitude of things. What I like to do is I always plan to have a potato leek soup the next day after making this recipe, and I use the leftover soubise as the base of that soup. There's all kinds of things. You could use this as the sauce itself. We're just gonna cook the pasta in a little bit of brown butter, and this is just a flavor component. But you could literally use this and it would be a faux Alfredo, but an onion soubise type of pasta dish, which would be absolutely delicious. So we're gonna blend this till smooth. You're gonna wanna crank it up pretty good because you really wanna get all those chunks. Leeks can be a little bit fibrous, so you really want to give this some time to blend completely down. By the end of it, you should have a nice, thick onion soubise cream. That looks pretty good. So we're going to transfer this to a squeeze bottle, and you'll see why obviously when we get to plating. Like I said, we're going to use some nice small dots as a flavor component. This is a little wet. Again, this will tighten up as it cools down. So we're going to pour this into our squeeze bottle, and then we're going to transfer it into the fridge to let this cool down until we're ready to use it. Like I said, you're going to have a lot more, but if you smell it, like you can smell potato and leek soup. That's one of the fun things about food is just the smell of one dish can lead you off into another whole completely different dish. And that's where the potato leek soup came for me. And this is a great base for that. So hold on to whatever your leftovers are of this and give it a try. Well, it is pasta time. We have made this beautiful dough, perfectly green color. We did this in the food processor. So it came out silky smooth. We're just gonna get this guy opened up. I mean, that is beautiful. Look, if you give it a nice dent, that will spring back, right? So that is absolutely perfect pasta dough. That's exactly what you're looking for. Don't be concerned if you don't have this exact same color, right? So color can rely on several things, and that's the freshness of the spinach, you know, how much chlorophyll is in the spinach, how bright orange or yellow your egg yolks are. So don't be concerned if it's not this color. Also, when you cook it in the water, that will enhance the color a little bit too. So what we're gonna do now is start rolling our dough. So first thing we need to do is just get a very, very small amount of flour on our board, and then we're gonna split this into thirds. So it's a little bit easier to handle. You don't end up with a 12-foot long piece of pasta dough. So we'll cut this into thirds, and then I'll show you a couple things that make rolling pasta super easy or easier. And I see a lot of mistakes happen, and I see a lot of recipes that tell people to make mistakes, and I don't know why. So first thing we're just gonna roll this out a little bit into almost like a rectangle, right? And we need to roll it thin enough where we can get through our widest setting on our pasta machine, right? So not too thin, but it takes a little bit of work to get it there, right? So we're just gonna roll it like that. Then what I like to do is I like to fold my sides up, flip it over, and then give it another roll, right? A lot of recipes tell you to fold this into a triangle, which I don't know why people would think that makes sense. You don't want it to come to a tapered end when you're rolling dough, and the smoother you can get the sides of the dough, the more room you're gonna have to work with, right? So that's why I like doing a little bit of time here. So we're gonna start on our widest setting. That's what our dough looks like now. We're gonna set the stand mixer to about a 4. We'll start rolling this through. So I like to go through twice, and then I'm gonna put it back on my board. I'm gonna fold it in half, and I'm gonna fold it back towards myself. So again, I'm giving myself those square edges, so we have that clean pasta dough. You don't have any rough edges, torn or broken edges. It really just makes the final product look a lot better. All right, so now we're gonna roll through again. And from this point, we're gonna go through twice on each setting. Then we'll change the setting, right? And the reason we're going through twice on each setting, the first time through stretches the dough. The second time through is actually what sets the dough in place. Okay, so we're about halfway through. You wanna go ahead and flour your board. Just give a light coating of flour to your pasta dough. You know, we've already got this perfect dough, so we really don't want to over flour it, because it will change the texture of the finished product, all right? So keep on working our way down, going through twice on every setting. And you notice because we took the time to roll it out a little bit, look at that perfect edge. This side has a little bit of rough edge, but that will work itself out as we get to the lower settings. All right, so that's our 4. So some pasta machines, they start at 8 and go down to 1. Mine starts at 1 and goes down up to 8. So we're going to about a 6 here. And if you're feeling brave, you could go all the way to a 7. A 6 is a good consistency for a stuffed pasta. If you're using regular pasta, you should be able to see through the dough. Obviously, for a colored pasta, that's going to be a little bit more difficult. All right. So one more time through here. This dough looks perfect. Look at that. That's what you want to see. You want to see that very thin, can pretty much see through it. If you look, you can see the light, you can see my hands through it. All right, so time to move on. All right, so this dough looks great. As you can see, nice and thin. You can pretty much see through it. So now what we're gonna do is start making our cappelletti. And cappelletti in Italian, I'm just gonna take off the edges there just to kind of give me a straight line on the very end. But cappelletti in Italian means little hats. Italians love to name things after what they saw in life. So it actually resembles a Pope hat, and you'll see that when we get it made. So I'm just gonna take off the end, I'm gonna cut it around the middle, lay these guys out, and we'll take off this curved end here. So a little bit of waste, but not too bad. You don't want to ever really re-roll pasta through if you've cut off scraps and kind of bunched it back up. It just won't have a good consistency. All right, so we're gonna take a pizza cutter here, and I'm gonna change these guys around a little bit so I can go straight towards camera here. So we're gonna take a pizza cutter, and just go very carefully right down the center. And those will be our wraps for our Capoletti. And then we're gonna do the same thing on this dough. This dough's got a little curve in it, but that is okay. We're still gonna try to go dead down the center. All right, so now we've got our sheets for our Capoletti. We'll turn these guys back around. And now we're gonna make them into squares, right? So that will be our final wrapper, and then we can start filling them. All right, so we've got our nice little squares made here. So these will be our spinach wrap for our artichoke filling. And I've got that right over here. So what we're gonna do is just take off a little bit of the end of our piping bag here. And we'll go ahead and pipe our filling directly into the middle of our squares. And then we can form our Capoletti. One thing to have on hand is a little bit of a squeeze bottle. You're gonna need this. I'm actually gonna give it a little mist just to get a little bit of moisture on it, and then we're gonna use that to help seal the Capoletti as well. So we're just gonna pipe our filling right in the middle, probably about a teaspoon. And just work your way down. Okay, so now we've got all of our little pasta wraps filled. I'm gonna put this back in the fridge, and that's just to keep it at that nice consistency. We don't want it to loosen up any. All right, so we're gonna start up here in this top corner. We're just gonna grab one of these guys up and give it a nice little spray. You wanna make sure it's moist but not too wet, all right? Then you're just gonna wrap corner to corner. Try to be as even as possible. They will look better in the long run when you finish them up. Make sure you seal them tightly. Make sure there is no air pockets in there, right? Go all the way down to the filling. Now here's what makes it a Capoletti. And I'm gonna give one side a little spray here. And we're just gonna tuck this guy and bring the tail of those two end pieces together. And there you have a perfect, beautiful Capoletti, or a little Popat. So that's our Capoletti. And we'll get a little bit more in detail here. I'll show you a couple more of these guys. So again, we're gonna take our pasta, give it a little spray, connect corner to corner, get all of the air out. If you push a little bit of the filling out, that's all right. Just have a little towel standing by on side that you can wipe your hand off with, and then we'll give it another little spritz. Meet them up end to end. And there you go, there we have our Capoletti. All right, so we're gonna repeat this process, and I mean from repeating the process from stretching the dough, right? So we're gonna repeat the process with the remaining dough, fill the remaining of our Capoletti, then we can finally get to cook them and serve them. They are so beautiful and so delicious, so let's fill the rest of these guys up. All right, so we've finished up our Capoletti. We've got about 50 here. I think I counted 48. I actually threw away a couple because they just didn't want to cooperate with me. That happens. So we're gonna let these sit in the fridge for about 30 minutes, just to let the ones that we finished last kind of catch up on drying out just a little bit. And that gives us time to bring our salted water to a boil. So we're gonna salt the water like the sea, just like you hear all the time whenever you're talking about pasta. Then we're gonna cook these guys up, finish them, plate them, and eat them, finally. Time to get some heat on all this stuff we've been working so hard on. If you come this far, you're almost there. So it's time to get back to the stove, fire up the CookCraft 10-inch skillet. First thing we're gonna do is melt a little bit of butter. And then to that butter, what we're gonna do is add a little bit of olive oil to get a little bit higher burn temperature on the butter, because we're gonna sear off the reserved artichoke hearts that we pulled out. And we're gonna sear off about 5 of these, and we're gonna cook off about 12 pastas. I usually serve 9, I'm gonna cook 12 just in case one pops. You always wanna have extras with stuffed pastas, just in case. So we're gonna get that cooking going, and then we can plate it up and have ourselves some pasta. All right, so our butter is nicely melted. We're gonna take 5 of these artichokes and give these guys a nice sear, let them crisp up on the edges. Okay, so since we have fresh pasta, obviously it's only gonna take about 90 seconds to cook. So once I flip those and they've got a little bit of char, we'll put the pasta into our slowly rolling, boiling water. We don't want it at a high boil, it will break the pasta apart. So you just want it at that slow rolling boil. Pasta's gonna cook for about 90 seconds in our 8-quart latching lid, Tri-Ply, CookCraft stock pot. So super convenient. The 8-quart CookCraft stock pot comes with a built-in strainer. So we're gonna transfer this over to the sink, strain the pasta, and then we're gonna transfer it into our skillet. All right, so all we wanna do is toss these guys real lightly in the butter, give them about 1 minute just to warm through, let that dough finish cooking, and then we're good to serve. Okay. So our pasta is finished cooking. It looks absolutely beautiful. So like I said, I like to plate in odd numbers. It just looks better to the eye, more visually appealing. So we're gonna use 9 of these guys. So I don't really need the spoon. They've cooled down a little bit, so I will just use my hands. Try to tap off some of that brown butter as you plate them. So we're just gonna spread them around the plate. We're not gonna clump them in. And you don't have to be this precise. I kind of I have fun plating, I enjoy it, I enjoy the artistic side of food. So, you know, it does help too. When you serve a dish that looks visually appealing, people are excited by it. People want to dive into it. All right, so we've got 9 pastas on there. Now it's time to get our little artichoke hearts. We'll just kind of scatter these guys around as well. Okay, so now we will work on getting our other garnishes. So we've got our onion soubise. This is the 3 onion soubise sauce that we made. And we're just gonna go in and kind of dot this around using different size dots. They don't have to be all the exact same size. I find that different sizes look a little bit better, look a little more visual appealing. All right, so we've got our soubise on there. So this stuff is absolutely delicious. It really highlights the flavors that are in the spinach and artichoke cappelletti. So I try to do at least 1 dot per cappelletti so you can take your fork and get through that. And then I have 2 other garnishes that I worked on. They're not super important, but they do make the dish look pretty. So first thing what I did is I just thin sliced lengthwise some scallions, the green parts that we didn't use for the soubise. And then what I did is I just kind of let them sit in some ice water for a while, and what happens is they get nice and curly. So we'll throw some of these guys on, kind of place them around. If you need to use the soubise as kind of like a placeholder or a onion holder, if you will, you can kind of rest it on the soubise. That way you get that height coming from the onion standing up a little bit. You know, lay some over top of the cappellettis. This is where you get that artistic moment, right? You get that freedom to kind of design the plate and make it look pretty. And I tell you, we joke about it, but we really 100% do eat with our eyes first. When we see a beautiful dish, our mouth starts watering and we want to dive into it. So take a little bit of extra time. It doesn't take that long. You don't have to be as perfectionist as I am while you're doing this. Okay, so we've got our scallions down, and then I just dehydrated some spinach leaves at 200 degrees in the oven. So we're gonna put a few of these guys around to give it a little bit of a crispiness, and also to draw your eye, so that's what you know you're eating. This is spinach. All right, we are almost there, guys. All right, there we go, guys. There is our spinach and artichoke cappelletti. It's beautiful, it's delicious. We've been working on it for a while. It is so rewarding when you make fresh pasta from home, and it's so easy to cook using the CookCraft Tri-Ply Stainless Steel cookware with the latching lids. It really makes everything a breeze doing it at home. So only one thing to do, and we gotta try this guy. All right, so I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna try to get the ultimate bite and get a little bit of everything. Get that soubise, that cappelletti, that artichoke. That's the ultimate bite. The pasta is perfection. And the filling is artichokey, lemony, but that soubise really brings everything together, ties it all together. And it's absolutely delicious. Ah, so good. Well, I hope this has inspired you guys. This recipe will be available on www.cookcraftco.com. Check it out. There's so many amazing recipes on there, more from me and some other amazing chefs. Until next time, this has been Cooking with CookCraft, and I'm Chef Shaun O'Neale.
Oh, these are good.